Porsche just reported a 98% collapse in operating profit. Not one rough quarter, an entire year. The worst since the financial crisis. Profit sliding from over 5 billion euros down to just 90 million. The same week that landed, Audi confirmed another 7,500 job cuts in Germany, on top of closing an entire factory in Brussels, and Volkswagen itself announced 50,000 job cuts by 2030 following its worst results since the diesel scandal nearly sank the company a decade ago. 3 separate disasters splashed across 3 different headlines on 3 different dates and 3 brands, and almost nobody connected the dots because almost nobody outside the industry realizes these are all the same company. Porsche, Audi, Volkswagen, Škoda, Seat, Cupra, Bentley, Lamborghini, Bugatti, one owner. Volkswagen alone was Britain's single best-selling brand last year, holding roughly 8.5% of the market. Add Audi at over 6%, and Škoda at 4%, and Cupra combined near another 3.5%. Then stack Porsche and Bentley on top, and you're looking at close to a quarter of every new car registered in the country. That's the scale of what's coming apart. This wasn't bad luck striking 3 companies simultaneously. It was one strategy decided once in one boardroom, failing across every badge at the same time. And the proof is sitting on British forecourts right now. Start with the foundation, because everything else was built on it. For 15 years, China effectively funded the Volkswagen empire. At its peak, the group sold more cars there than anywhere else on Earth. And those profits bankrolled everything. New platforms, electric experiments, dividends, and mistakes elsewhere. Volkswagen held the top spot in China for the better part of 2 decades, but the catch was that most of what sold there was still gasoline-powered, and the shift to electric came far too slowly. Then a Chinese company called BYD took the crown in 2024, and by 2025, Volkswagen had slipped to 3rd, even behind Geely. Combustion engine deliveries in China dropped nearly 20% in a single stretch. Porsche's China sales fell 26% in 2025 alone, compounded by a property crash that gutted luxury spending. Audi watched its biggest market, nearly 40% of everything it sold, slide backward. The cushion that had absorbed every previous misstep simply deflated, and crucially, it deflated for all of them at once, since every brand leaned on the same market. When it went, it took the entire group safety net down with it. That was the external shock, the part everyone points to. The self-inflicted wounds run deeper, starting with something almost no car buyer has ever heard of. Cariad, Volkswagen's in-house software division built to write the digital brains for every modern model across the group screens, driver assist systems, the operating system shared by Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, and Bentley alike. It was meant to be the group's defining advantage, a shared engine room letting every brand move faster and cheaper. Instead, it became one of the most expensive failures in company history. Software arrived late, broke constantly, and delayed car after car, and the new electric Porsche Macan landed roughly a year behind schedule because of software problems, and the Audi built alongside it on the same underpinnings slipped too. Flagship Audi sedans were delayed, a Bentley got pushed back. The issue was never one brand fumbling individually, it was the shared component rotting and spreading damage to everything plugged into it. Billions went in before the group finally cut 1,600 jobs from the division by the end of 2025, when the thing meant to connect every brand becomes the thing breaking every brand. You don't have a branding problem, you have a structural one. Then came the platform issue, and the same pattern repeated. Volkswagen bet enormous sums on a shared electric architecture, common underpinnings, batteries, and motors spread across dozens of models and badges to spread out development costs. The Volkswagen ID lineup sat on it. So did the Audi Q4 e-tron, the Audi e-tron and Q8 e-tron, and Porsche's early electric platforms, all branches of the same family tree. On paper, brilliant. Build once, sell 10 times. In reality, buyers looked at what came out of it and shrugged. The clearest casualty was Brussels' largest private employer, a factory built around a single model. The Q8 e-tron electric SUV, demand for an expensive flagship electric Audi never materialized, and in February 2025, after unions fought every step of the way, Audi closed the plant for good. Roughly 3,000 people lost their jobs directly. No buyer could be found for the site, and production shifted to Mexico, a flagship electric model built in Western Europe, killed off within a few years of launch because the shared bet underneath it never paid off. It got worse with batteries. Porsche had invested heavily in its own battery operation alongside a Swedish supplier called Northvolt, conceived as Europe's answer to Asian battery dominance. In late 2024, Northvolt went bankrupt, blowing a hole straight through Porsche's entire battery strategy. And by summer 2025, Porsche had shut down its own battery production, laid off staff, and written off hundreds of millions of euros. It will never recover. The electric version of its compact 718 sports car, originally due in 2025, got pushed back to 2027, leaving a 2-year gap with nothing to fill it. One failed supplier and an entire chain of plans collapsed behind it. That brings us to the brand that was supposed to make this whole electric gamble look brilliant, Porsche. It was meant to be the prestige electric maker, the badge that could charge a fortune for an electric car and get away with it, justifying the group pouring billions into batteries in the first place. For a while, the Taycan seemed to prove the point, then it stopped. Taycan deliveries dropped from a peak of over 41,000 in 2021 to barely 16,000 in 2025. Roughly a 60% collapse in the one car meant to lead the charge. Total Porsche deliveries fell 10%, dipping under 280,000, the worst year for the company since 2009. So Porsche did something a company only does when its plan has genuinely failed. It reversed course. After 4 separate profit warnings in a single year, it abandoned its target of 80% electric sales by 2030, pivoted back toward gasoline and hybrid engines, and took a write-down of around 4.5 billion euros, roughly 3 billion of that, writing down the brand's own value, and another 2 billion scrapping the electric product roadmap. That write-down is what crushed profit from 5 billion down to 90 million. Operating margin fell from 14.5%, the best of any automaker on the planet, to just 0.3%. Porsche was dropped from Germany's top stock index, and its shares have lost more than half their value since going public in 2022. That leads directly to the part that should matter most to anyone shopping for one of these cars: depreciation. When a manufacturer abandons a strategy this publicly, the used market reacts accordingly. And the figures from UK valuation firms tell the story better than any boardroom statement. According to Cox Automotive and Cap HPI, an electric car in Britain now retains roughly 39% of its value after 3 years, compared to 52 to 56% for an equivalent petrol or diesel model, a real painful gap. Take the Audi e-tron GT. A 1-year-old example lost around 27% of its value in a single year, with trade-in figures dropping from over £45,000 to around £33,000 over the same period. A diesel Audi A7, a comparable conventionally powered car, lost just 2.7%. Same brand, same showroom. Wildly different fates. Here's the detail that proves the point about shared parts. The e-tron GT is mechanically almost identical to the Porsche Taycan underneath, yet the Taycan, carrying the stronger badge, has held far more of its value, around 60-something% in many cases. Two nearly identical cars, two completely different outcomes, decided purely by the badge on the bonnet. The Volkswagen ID.3 has been weighed down by huge fleet volumes flooding the used market, losing close to 18% of its value annually. The Audi Q4 e-tron starts around £46,000 new and sits near £29,000 after 2 years, and it's worse still in Germany, the company's home market, where these same electric cars retain under half their value. My honest read for anyone shopping used right now: The Taycan is the exception worth considering. The e-tron GT is the one to avoid. And most of the mainstream group's electric cars are genuine second-hand bargains precisely because the people who bought them new absorbed a brutal hit. That's the quiet betrayal buried inside this whole saga. The early adopters who trusted the badge and paid full price are the ones who effectively financed the failed strategy through their own resale losses. Now to the brand caught most awkwardly in the middle of all this. Audi spent years unsure of its own identity, chasing BMW and Mercedes without quite catching either, then tying itself in knots over electrification. Even its naming convention became a mess. Odd numbers for electric models and even numbers for petrol, a scheme so confusing the company eventually scrapped it. It built expensive electric SUVs the market didn't want. In factories it later had to shutter. Its all-electric deliveries actually fell 8% in 2024, down to around 160,000 at the exact moment it had staked the brand's future on going electric. Audi now employs roughly 88,000 people worldwide, 55,000 of them in Germany, and is cutting 7,500 of those German jobs by 2029, while chasing €1 billion a year in savings. Here's the contradiction that sums Audi up perfectly. In the same breath as swinging the axe, it announced it would plow roughly €8 billion into its two largest German plants, cutting workers and pouring in money simultaneously because it genuinely doesn't know which direction to commit to. The brand built on advancement through technology got caught flat-footed by technology and worse, by software. Its own parent company failed to deliver on time. Audi didn't collapse on its own. It got dragged down by the shared software backbone and shared platform, then had to cut its own workforce to pay for the fallout, which brings the whole story home to Germany and to the part that would have seemed unthinkable a few years ago. Volkswagen, the company at the center of all this, came within a hair of closing factories on home soil for the first time. In its history, it threatened to shut 3 German plants, demanded a 10% pay cut, and tore up a job security agreement that had stood since 1994. Roughly 100,000 workers walked out in warning strikes that December. Eventually, unions fought it to a standstill and outright closures were avoided, but the price was steep. Over 35,000 jobs gone by 2030, since escalated toward 50,000, a target of €15 billion in savings, frozen wage increases, reduced production capacity, and slashed apprenticeships in Wolfsburg, all against the backdrop of a German economy grinding through its 3rd straight year of recession. Europe's largest automaker in Europe's largest economy openly admitted it could no longer comfortably afford its own home turf. And that's not a brand fumbling a single model. That's a pillar of German industry visibly cracking in real time. And while it cracked, the companies that caused the original disruption kept feasting. Chinese automakers didn't just win on price, they won on speed. A traditional German car typically takes 4 to 5 years from first sketch to showroom. Companies like BYD, NIO, and Xiaomi do it in roughly 2. Xiaomi, a phone company, launched its first ever car and broke sales records with it. These were cheap knockoffs. They arrived with better software, smoother phone integration, more convincing driver assist systems, and pricing that made German cars look dated and overpriced by comparison. The humiliation peaked when Volkswagen, the company that practically taught the world to mass-produce cars, started leaning on Chinese firm Sheng to license technology it could no longer develop fast enough on its own, the inventor going hat in hand to the upstart. As China drained profit from the East, a second front opened in the West. In spring 2025, the U.S. imposed tariffs on imported vehicles, 25% initially, later settling at 15% for a group that builds a substantial share of its American-bound cars. In Europe, every percentage point came straight out of an already thin margin. Volkswagen directly blamed these tariffs when its operating profit fell 37% in the first quarter of the year. And Porsche, which manufactures entirely in Europe while selling heavily into America, took a hit too. Two of the group's three biggest markets, China and the US, turned hostile within the same 12 months. One company exposed on both fronts simultaneously for the simple reason that every brand underneath it relied on the exact same two markets. Which leaves the final piece, the one underlying everything else and arguably the most telling. Look at who actually controls this empire, and the panic starts to make sense. The Volkswagen Group is run through a holding company controlled by the Porsche and Peck family, with the German state of Lower Saxony holding a large stake and Qatar holding even more. For years, the same executive, Oliver Blume, ran both Volkswagen Group and Porsche simultaneously, one person holding two of the industry's biggest jobs through the worst crisis either company has faced. He's since stepped back from the Porsche role, but the underlying structure tells the real story. This is a company so large, so tangled, so weighed down by competing owners and political stakeholders and a workforce that can't easily downsize, that when its strategy went wrong, it simply couldn't turn the ship fast enough. The write-downs, the index removal, the halved share price, the 50,000 job cuts, none of these are isolated problems. They're the sound of one enormous organization realizing it placed the exact same bet across every brand it owns and got it wrong everywhere at once. Porsche, Audi, and Volkswagen didn't have three separate bad years. They made three shared bets. One software division, one electric platform, one market in China, and all three collapsed together because they were never truly separate in the first place. 5 badges, one decision, one shared fall. For anyone eyeing one of these cars on a forecourt, that cuts both ways. The new electric models took the hit, which means the used ones are genuinely cheap, and a sensible second-hand Taycan or ID is a real bargain, bought off someone else's depreciation. But think carefully before spending £40,000 on a brand new one, because the resale figures are telling you in plain numbers that the market doesn't yet trust where this company is heading. There's a quieter cost too. When a brand shrinks this fast, the dealer network shrinks with it, along with the supply of parts and the specialists who genuinely understand these cars. Buying a cheap used electric Audi or Porsche today is a genuine saving, but servicing it 5 years from now could mean a longer drive and a longer wait than it does today. A quarter of the cars on British roads belong to a company that just had to admit its biggest strategic bet was a mistake. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to buy with your eyes open